My elder sister schemed to marry me off to her fiancé. Though he is a lowly illegitimate son, he is sufficient for you. She never imagined that this illegitimate son would one day ascend to the throne, and she would have to kneel before me as empress. My elder sister is the legitimate daughter of the prime minister's mansion. As beautiful as a fairy, born into a life of luxury and privilege. The only blemish on her is her marriage. When her mother gave birth to her, there was an accident, and Gu Huiqing's mother risked her life to save her, thus sealing this unbreakable marriage pact. She despised Gu Huiqing's status as a concubine's son. Over the years, Gu Huiqing studied in our family's study, enduring countless insults and torments from her. But no one could have imagined that the eldest sister would dare to do such a thing. To completely destroy this marriage, she actually poisoned me and Gu Huiqing. Gu Huiqing smashed the teacup, his gaze sharp, leaving a deep cut on his wrist. He clenched the porcelain shard tightly, a trickle of blood seeping from the corner of his eye, and gasped at me, "Quick! Climb out the window. You're a woman, I can't let you get hurt." Hurried footsteps echoed outside, accompanied by my elder sister's suppressed joyful tone. Gu Huiqing closed his eyes in disgust, grabbed my hand, and pushed me toward the window. "Hurry up and leave." My expression remained calm. "We can't escape." The front door was kicked open, and the potent effects of the drug overwhelmed my senses. In the chaos, I heard Gu Huiqing's hoarse voice, "It's all my fault. Fourth miss." When I woke up, Gu Huiqing had been beaten to the brink of death by my father and sent back to the Gu family. Gu Huiqing took full responsibility for the crime. His marriage to the eldest sister was called off. However, the eldest sister and her mother refused to give up, urging my father to have me killed. There are no walls that don't let the wind through. Yu Jie and Gu Gongzi have been in the same room together, and our Shin family has strict morals. If Yu Jie takes her own life, even if rumors spread in the future, it won't matter. My father remained silent for a moment before turning to me and saying, "Take your own life." But I hadn't done anything wrong. Why should I take my own life? To save myself, I sought out Gu Huiqing and demanded that he marry me. This was the least damaging option available to me at the time. In my previous life, I chose another method, which, though successful in breaking the deadlock, came at a great cost. I had many words on the tip of my tongue, but they all got stuck there. I thought Gu Huiqing would reject me, so I was preparing to find another way to turn the situation around. He spoke solemnly. "I am an unloved illegitimate son of the Gu family. The eldest madam views me as a thorn in her side. She will certainly not care about my marriage, and I fear she will treat you unfairly. In the future, once I achieve success and fame, I will definitely compensate you with a wedding in full regalia." My marriage to Gu Huiqing was simple, but my dowry was far from ordinary. My mother was the daughter of a merchant, and my maternal family was extremely wealthy. As the eldest wife, Zhang Shi had been keeping an eye on my mother's dowry for years, trying every means to seize it. But each time she was thwarted by my mother's subtle tactics. This time was no exception. Before I left for the wedding, she wanted to inspect my dowry. I smiled faintly at the female relatives who had come to see me and said, "Our eldest madam is a lady of noble birth. Unlike some petty-minded women who obsess over the dowry of concubines and side wives, just wanting to seize a few silver coins to add to their own children's dowry." My elder sister, who had been touching my dowry chest, quickly withdrew her hand. The mother and daughter looked displeased but forced a smile and followed my lead. Before leaving, my elder sister held my hand and whispered in my ear with a mocking smile, "Though you're just a concubine's son, you're more than enough for her. After all, your mother was just a lowly merchant." I laughed lightly in response. "Lowly? I doubt the entire Xiang mansion's assets combined amount to half of what my mother left me in dowry. The emperor most despises his ministers accepting bribes. My father holds a high position and must set an example. That's why he married the daughter of a poor family. Though our family's daily life isn't exactly impoverished, it's far from luxurious. This is precisely the pain of my elder sister. At gatherings of noble ladies, she is always the most modestly dressed. Though she boasts of her strict family upbringing, she envies me deeply. Every time she returns, she comes to my room to cause trouble, trying to steal my hairpins. My words today have struck a nerve. She raised her voice in anger. You worthless woman. I'll tear your mouth off. Xin Yuan. Gu Huiqing pulled my hand and shoved me into the flower-decorated palanquin, scolding in a deep voice. Miss Xin, behave yourself. Xin Yuan stomped her feet in anger. Don't forget that I'm your fiancé. I'm the one who's been engaged to you for over a decade. Gu Huiqing coldly mounted his horse. That's no longer the case. My wife is now Xin Yuan, the fourth daughter of the Xin family. Just a few days after Xin Yuan and Gu Huiqing broke off their engagement, she became engaged to Gu Huiqing's older brother, the legitimate son of the minister of the imperial secretariat. It was clear that the two had been secretly involved for quite some time. When I told Gu Huiqing about this, he was practicing calligraphy in his study. After hearing the news, he didn't even bother to look up. Instead, he asked me what I wanted to eat for dinner. This was different from the rumors about him in his previous life. Everyone said that Gu Huiqing was deeply in love with Xin Yuan. And no matter how she mistreated him, he endured it willingly. I asked him, "Aren't you angry?" Such a huge green hat. He raised his eyebrows and smiled, asking me, "Why should I be angry? Does my wife want me to be angry?" I laughed it off and changed the subject. He was probably a reserved man who preferred to cry in private rather than let me see his embarrassment. On the day Gu Huiqing and I returned to my parents' home for the post-wedding visit, after meeting my father, we were detained by Xin Yuan. She had completely changed her usual arrogant attitude toward me and Gu Huiqing, being overly polite. "Sister, can you lend me 12 loads of your dowry? I'll return it after the wedding ceremony. After all, we're all family now." I nearly laughed out loud. She had initially wanted to borrow me to be in the same room as Gu Huiqing, using the excuse of tarnishing the Xin family's reputation to have my father execute me. She intended to seize the dowry my mother left me and use it as her own. But she didn't expect me to take an unconventional path and marry Gu Huiqing. Now her dowry has become a huge problem. Her mother and my father had, of course, prepared a dowry for her. But it was ordinary, even somewhat modest. The Gu family is a prominent and influential clan, and now holds real power in the Ministry of War. They are by no means insignificant. The heads of both families believed that the simpler the wedding, the better, as this would allow them to gain a reputation for integrity in the emperor's eyes. But clearly, Xin Yuan did not share this view. After all, the guests attending the wedding would be the noble women she had cultivated relationships with over the years. She had been competitive for many years. How could she possibly want to be talked about because of her dowry on the most important day of her life? Since she couldn't openly demand it, she could only temporarily submit to achieve her goal. I must admit, I was a bit impressed by her ability to bend and adapt. I smiled gently. "No, you can't." She immediately changed her expression, refusing to speak kindly to me anymore, and instead grabbed Gu Huiqing's arm. She looked weak and tearful, and I felt sorry for her. "Huiqing brother, everything that happened before was because my mother forced me to do it. I had no choice. Now that I'm about to marry your older brother, you don't want to see me humiliated in front of everyone, do you?" I noticed Gu Huiqing's furrowed brows and leaned close to his ear to threaten him. "You'll have to borrow the money yourself. I won't lend you any. If you dare to use your bride's dowry to win over your lover, I'll go to the imperial court and report you to the emperor, and he'll have you thrown into prison." His tightly furrowed brows softened instantly, and he spoke in a low, hoarse voice with a smile. "Then you'll have to be a young widow. Xin Yuan pushed me away from Gu Huiqing and leaned in close to him. Almost face to face. Huiqing, please help me. Will you? Gu Huiqing took a step back, avoiding her touch, and pulled me toward him, saying with disgust, "Who you marry has nothing to do with me. Why should I help you?" Xin Yuan thought Gu Huiqing was just being stubborn and didn't take his words seriously. "Huiqing brother, please help me persuade my sister to lend me her dowry for just one day. Once I'm married, I'll return everything in full." I snorted in laughter. "Big sister, do you even believe what you're saying? This is something we agreed on privately, without any witnesses. If I lend you my dowry, once you enter the Gu family and register your marriage, they won't acknowledge it. Who will I go to for justice?" Xin Yuan flashed a moment of embarrassment at being called out. "What are you saying? I'm the legitimate daughter of the Prime Minister's family. How could I possibly take your dowry?" I hugged Gu Huiqing's arm, leaned against his shoulder, and sang with a smile, "The legitimate daughter of the Prime Minister's family is borrowing dowry from a concubine's daughter." Xin Yuan was still a child, spoiled by Zhang Shi, and had never suffered any hardships in her life. Today, she had already reached her limit by lowering herself to smile and humor me. After I spoke to her in a sarcastic tone, her arrogant nature emerged. "Are you going to lend it or not? Do you believe me or not? I'll throw your mother's spirit tablet out of the ancestral hall." A lowly merchant's daughter, being allowed into the Prime Minister's ancestral hall is already a blessing from our ancestors. Thinking of my mother's cause of death, I laughed without warmth, narrowing my eyes to hide the murderous intent in them, and said in a pitiful tone, "I was just joking with my sister. It's only a few dozen loads of dowry. I'll have someone bring it to you tonight." Gu Huiqing's voice was icy cold. "My wife's mother did nothing wrong in her lifetime. My wife is doing well in the mansion now. What right do you have to throw her mother's spirit tablet out? Do you want to be accused of disobeying your elders and disrespecting the dead? Or does your father want to go to the censorate to drink tea?" Xin Yuan saw that I had agreed to her, thinking I was afraid of her, and grew even more arrogant, completely disregarding Gu Huiqing's words. "You're just a bastard son, you have no right to speak here. My sister has already agreed to me." She turned her head, raised her chin, and resumed her usual domineering manner toward me. "Tonight at midnight, I'll have you carry it. Make sure you do it neatly so no one sees, or it'll ruin my reputation." Gu Huiqing was so angry he closed his eyes, pulled me away, and muttered, "Shame on you." It was truly rare, the first time in 2 lifetimes I'd heard Gu Huiqing curse. It seems that the more you loved someone in the past, the more you hate them after being betrayed. On the carriage back to the mansion, Gu Huiqing got off the horse, lifted the curtain, and entered the carriage. He took my hand and said, "Don't worry. I have a way. She dares not take away your mother's position." I didn't respond to Gu Huiqing's words. I didn't tell him that I had agreed to lend Xin Yuan the dowry. It was just a scheme I had set up. If he ever finds out that I want Xin Yuan's life, he might kill me for her. It seems that to turn Gu Huiqing against Xin Yuan and have him stand by my side, I'll need to find more evidence about the true cause of his mother's death. In my previous life, I did end up marrying Gu Huiqing, but it was a series of unfortunate events. In my previous life, after Xin Yuan poisoned me and Gu Huiqing, I used my mother's death as an excuse to escape Xin Yuan's plot to kill me. Xin Yuan was forced by her father to marry Gu Huiqing as agreed, but on the day of the wedding, she eloped with Gu Huiqing's older brother. Both families were furious, and in the end, I had no choice but to marry Gu Huiqing in Xin Yuan's place. After learning that Gu Huiqing and I had married, Xin Yuan returned to the Prime Minister's mansion and eventually married Gu Huiqing's older brother. After the marriage, since we hadn't divided the household, Xin Yuan frequently bullied me and Gu Huiqing. When she bullied me, I would retaliate without Gu Huiqing saying a word. But no matter how much Xin Yuan humiliated him, Gu Huiqing remained silent, as if he had no temper at all. I was frustrated and disappointed. No matter how much I loved someone, I couldn't accept this. Later, I found out that Gu Huiqing's mother had told him on her deathbed to protect Xin Yuan. At the time, Gu Huiqing's mother and Zhang Shi were captured together. Zhang Shi escaped but couldn't take Xin Yuan with her. It was Gu Huiqing's mother who took Gu Huiqing and Xin Yuan with her as they fled from bandits. In the end, they were discovered by the bandits. Gu Huiqing's mother sacrificed her life to protect Gu Huiqing and Xin Yuan. Before she died, she instructed Gu Huiqing to protect Xin Yuan at all costs. If his mother knew that her final act of kindness had led to such an outcome, I wonder if she would be so enraged that she would rise from the grave to seek revenge on Xin Yuan. Gu Huiqing and his older brother, Gu Yuan, were both candidates for the imperial examinations in the same year. Gu Yuan failed the imperial examination last time, so he ended up taking it with Gu Huiqing this time. After they had their wedding ceremony, they had little time for intimacy. Most of the time, they had to go to the private tutoring school or the study to review their lessons. Over time, Xin Yuan's mood grew increasingly sour. Sometimes, she would see Gu Huiyan and Gu Huiqing leaving together for the private tutoring school and would mock Gu Huiqing for being a concubine's son. She said he was a bastard and dared to aspire to pass the imperial examinations and seek glory. She also said that someone like him would only be there to make up the numbers in the examination hall and be mocked by others. Yesterday, Gu Huiqing's essay was highly praised by the grand tutor at the private tutoring school. When he returned home, Gu Yuan's expression was not good. This morning, Xin Yuan saw Gu Huiqing and angrily walked over to push him. "What do you have to show off about?" I was quite surprised. I had only heard that Xin Yuan would mock Gu Huiqing with a few words, but I didn't expect her to resort to physical violence. Today, I happened to be out with Gu Huiqing and witnessed the entire scene. Gu Huiqing pushed her hand away in disgust. "Get lost." I widened my eyes in shock. What? Is this something Gu Huiqing would say to Xin Yuan? Xin Yuan raised her hand to slap Gu Huiqing's face. "You're just a bastard. Why don't you stay at home and stop trying to steal your brother's spotlight all day long? Don't you know your place? Your brother is the legitimate son, and you're just a bastard. Do you think you're worthy?" Gu Huiqing impatiently pushed her hand away and pulled me away. "You're crazy." Xin Yuan wouldn't let it go. "Xin Yu, did you tell him to do this? Gu Huiqing never treated me like this before. I was completely innocent." Xin Yuan's eyes turned red with anger. Unable to hit Gu Huiqing, she took her anger out on me. Before her hand could even touch me, Gu Huiqing stopped her. Gu Huiqing gripped her wrist tightly with a grim expression. "If you dare to touch her, I'll break your fingers one by one and feed them to you." Xin Yuan turned pale with fear. Unable to breathe, Gu Huiqing released her hand. A circle of bruises appeared on Xin Yuan's delicate wrist. I was utterly shocked. In my previous life, even if I had died, Gu Huiqing's attitude toward Xin Yuan had always been indifferent. No matter how much Xin Yuan caused trouble, Gu Huiqing had always ignored her, though he basically ignored everyone else. But because of their childhood friendship with Xin Yuan, I always thought it might be his way of spoiling her. Why is this life's Gu Huiqing so ruthless toward Xin Yuan, even going so far as to curse her out openly? I've witnessed this over the past few days. Gu Huiqing remains indifferent toward others, but whenever he encounters Xin Yuan, his disgust is unhidden, and sometimes I can even sense a cold, murderous intent. Has he already discovered the cause of his mother's death? But he doesn't seem like the type to take it out on others. Gu Huiqing returned from the study in the afternoon and was summoned to the ancestral hall by the matriarch. I had the servants reheat the meals, but when I went out to ask, I found out he had been taken away immediately upon returning. I hurried over, certain that Xin Yuan was slandering him to the first lady. When I arrived, Xin Yuan was crying in Gu Yuan's arms. while the first lady pointed at Gu Huiqing's face and shouted, "Do you have any shame? She is now your sister-in-law. And you dare to treat her so disrespectfully." My leg nearly gave out as I stepped through the door. I thought Gu Huiqing would remain silent again. But to my surprise, he suddenly laughed coldly. "My wife is as beautiful as a flower. Even if she threw herself at me, I would find her repulsive." Two servants entered from outside, knelt down, and recounted everything that had happened that morning. When the servants mentioned how Xin Yuan had roughly tried to hit someone, she muttered, "It's impossible. No one was there. No one. You're lying. You're framing me." Gu Huiqing said indifferently, "I've already reported this to my father. He will make his own judgment. If there's nothing to it, my wife is waiting for me to return to the room for dinner." After speaking, he ignored their commotion and led me into the side room. Gu and Yuan suddenly chased after him. "Fourth brother, are you really going to compete with me?" Gu Huiqing raised an eyebrow. "Do I need to compete?" Xin Yuan emerged from behind. "The patriarch won't allow a concubine's son to trample on a legitimate son to establish himself in officialdom." I sneered. A concubine's son ranked first in the imperial examination and a legitimate son who didn't even pass the preliminary examination. Which one do you think my father-in-law would choose? The steward by my father-in-law's side smiled and bowed to Xin Yuan. "The master said you are confined to your quarters for a month until the imperial examination ends. Lady, please go." Xin Yuan was so angry she stomped her feet. But she dared not disobey her elders and could only reluctantly be led into the courtyard and locked up. On the way back, Gu Huiqing's gaze lingered on me. He leaned in with a half-smile. "How did you know I'd rank in the top ranks?" "I also know you'll become emperor." I smiled and hugged him. "My husband is a dragon among men, of course he'll pass the imperial examination." He snorted, then whispered in my ear, "Do you know you'll become empress?" My heart skipped a beat, and I nearly fell to the ground. He quickly caught me, frowned, and said, "Can't you walk properly?" A thought raced through my mind. And he continued, "If you were to become the queen mother, wouldn't you end up falling flat on your face?" I looked up at the sky in silence. I had overthought it again. If he had been reborn, he would have already become the crown prince. Why would he be framed and end up marrying me? In the month leading up to the imperial examination, Gu Huiqing practically lived in the study. I knew Xin Yuan's temperament. If she had said those words, she wouldn't give up easily. I've had someone keep an eye on her all this time. She couldn't hold back any longer. The day before the exam, Gu Huiqing suddenly froze, dropped his book, stood up from his chair, and started walking toward the door. I saw he was heading toward Xin Yuan's courtyard and quickly grabbed him. "What are you doing? You've been cheated on and you're still not over it. You worthless man. Did she not return your dowry yet? Wait. I'll go get it back for you." He pushed my hand away and tried to leave. I felt guilty and quickly held him back. "No. No. Wait until you graduate. She'll return it to me on her own." What I didn't say was that the dowry was just a ploy to lure Xin Yuan into the trap. The time wasn't right yet, we couldn't tip her off. I wanted her to reap what she had sown. On the day Gu Huiqing and Gu and Yuan entered the examination hall, almost the entire family went to send them off. The entire journey, Xin Yuan didn't stop smiling. Her gaze was filled with hatred as she smiled at me and said, "Sister, I've prepared a surprise for you. A very big surprise." I replied with a smile, "Me too." After the exams ended and the examination hall was opened, only Gu Huiqing returned. When Xin Yuan saw Gu Huiqing, she looked as though she had seen a ghost. "Why are you back? Where's your brother?" "I had someone take Gu Huiqing down to rest. Your older brother can't come back." Xin Yuan's face turned pale. "What do you mean?" I smiled brightly. "This is the surprise I prepared for you." Soon after, officials from the Ministry of Justice came to the study to find my father. After they left, My father collapsed onto the armchair. And Yuan had been caught cheating with a cheat sheet. The emperor was furious and demoted him to a commoner, barring him from ever holding office again. Upon hearing this, Xin Yuan fainted. I feigned shock. Impossible. Father, my eldest brother is the legitimate heir of the family. The child you intended to support. He must have known the consequences of smuggling notes. This must be a frame-up. There must be spies from another faction within our household. This is a plot to prevent factional strife. Only one descendant from each official family is allowed to enter the court and hold real power. Even if the younger brothers enter the officialdom later, they will only hold nominal positions to avoid suspicion. My father's eyes lit up. That's it. Hurry up and investigate. As long as we have evidence. Once I present it to the emperor, Yuan will be saved. I had been waiting for him to say that. After the search was nearly complete, I had someone close to Xin Yuan reveal that she had written a note and sewn it into her clothes. But the note was meant for the fourth young master. How could it be found on the eldest son? Regardless of which child it was found on, it would be an irreversible loss for the father-in-law. The father-in-law was furious. She still wants to harm my two sons. When Xin Yuan woke up, she looked dazed. The father-in-law walked up and slapped her to the ground. The doctor, who had just finished taking her pulse and hadn't had a chance to speak, shouted, "What are you doing, sir? The lady is pregnant." The father-in-law froze in place. And I was also stunned. She really is hard to kill. Xin Yuan was locked up. And it was only after my father and the father-in-law's family pleaded with the emperor together that Guan Yuan was given a lenient sentence. Although he was not demoted to a commoner, he was also barred from the officialdom. As for the person buried in Xin Yuan's courtyard, Guan Yuan's temperament had changed drastically. He often got drunk and beat Xin Yuan. I didn't hesitate to tell Gu Huaiqing about this. But he didn't even bat an eyelid. I approached him and asked, "Do you still love Xin Yuan?" He raised his eyebrows and suddenly smiled. "My wife is as beautiful as a fairy and incredibly intelligent. Why would I go and love a vicious fool?" I wriggled my fingers free from his grasp and said, "Husband, can you cook a meal for me?" "Sure." Gu Huaiqing didn't even ask what I liked to eat. He spent an entire day preparing a feast of dishes I loved. Someone from the kitchen came to say that Gu Huaiqing had been busy all day, failing many times, with cuts on his hands and blisters from the oil. After tasting each dish, I took a handkerchief to wipe my lips and calmly said to Gu Huaiqing, "My father, though now a chancellor, was once just a kitchen servant in my maternal grandfather's household. Because he was skilled in cooking, my mother recognized his talent and gave him the opportunity to study. After he passed the imperial exams, my mother and my maternal grandfather spared no effort to help him climb the ranks in the bureaucracy. Yet he still despised my mother's merchant background and married Zhang Shi, a woman of low birth but from an official family. Everyone praised him for not pandering to merchants and for his integrity. But no one remembered my mother's years of sacrifice. When my mother gave birth to me in childbirth, she longed for a taste of the lotus flower cake her father had once made so well. Why father, disregarding her condition, suddenly erupted into a tirade, declaring that the time he spent working in the kitchen for my mother was the most shameful period of his life. My mother was later pushed into the river by Zhang Shi and her daughter, dying in terror. When my father learned of this, he dismissed it lightly. I was framed by Xin Yuan and forced to share a room with you. They persuaded my father to let me take my own life to preserve the Xin family's honor. And he agreed. Gu Huaiqing, you are my confidant. There is nothing I can hide from you. Now that I have told you the truth, I will reveal the rest. After my mother's death, I was taken back by my maternal grandfather to be raised. I have returned to the Xin family to exact revenge. The lives of the three of them, I will not spare a single one. Gu Huaiqing's usually gentle, dark eyes now held a faint, cold smile. He suddenly transformed into a different person. His jade-like fingers playfully twirling my loose hair, curling it around his fingertips. He leaned close to my ear, whispering a single word as he exhaled a sweet, scorching breath. Like a demon. Let them die then. My mother didn't die trying to save the Zhang family. The Zhang family fled, exposing my mother's whereabouts. And she was hacked to death by bandits. You're right. We're bedmates, we should be honest with each other. My wife. I've loved you for 2 lifetimes. Not a day more or less. The last words choked him, and he struggled to hold them back. We locked eyes. No longer pretending. The fact that he had been reborn was so obvious, there was no need to pretend anymore. After that day, Gu Huaqing never put on the facade of a gentle, silent man in front of me again. He became unexpectedly reckless, especially in bed, and sweet words came effortlessly to him in everyday life. I couldn't believe he had managed to maintain that dull facade in the past. Xin Yuan returned to her parents' home to cry and complain. Her father used his connections to secure a position for Gu and Yuan in the military. Her life in the Gu household finally began to improve. Her father-in-law, considering the child in her womb, said that the past would be forgiven, and that the family would live happily together from now on. Xin Yuan shed 2 tears, then turned around and sold the servant who had once mistreated her into slavery. In the blink of an eye, she returned to her former arrogant ways. Looking at the remaining dowry boxes in the storeroom, it was time to retrieve my belongings. It was time to close the net. As I had anticipated, after Xin Yuan had used my dowry to put on a show and garner envy, she immediately registered everything upon arriving at the Xin household. She relied on the fact that the eldest madam was her husband's biological mother, and was certain that the eldest madam, who managed the inner courtyard, would protect her even if she found out. My husband was merely an unloved concubine's son and couldn't stand up for me. Moreover, she was now carrying the legitimate grandson of the Gu family's eldest branch. How noble and prestigious. I approached Xin Yuan twice, first with courtesy and then with firmness. Each time, she mocked me triumphantly. So what if I won't give it to you? If you're so capable, come and take it. The eldest grandson is growing in my womb, and even my father-in-law will have to obey me. Hearing this, I merely laughed it off. Take it? What a foolish idea. I would make her hand it over willingly. If she knew the humiliation the eldest madam had suffered at my hands, perhaps she wouldn't be so ignorant and arrogant. The next afternoon, I dragged Xin Yuan to the eldest madam's presence. Xin Yuan threw herself at the eldest madam, wiping away tears as she complained. Who took your dowry? My dowry is meant for my children in the future. This was a subtle hint to the eldest madam that the dowry she had taken from me was meant for her grandchildren. Her words immediately aligned the eldest madam with her. Upon learning of the dowry's value, the eldest madam immediately changed her demeanor, revealing her greedy true nature. Who can prove the dowry belongs to you? What gives you the right to claim it's yours? Daring to slander your elder sister-in-law like this, you deserve to be punished by family law. Just then, Gu Huaiqing arrived at the door with a group of candidates who had just finished the imperial examinations, seeking an audience with his father. Coincidentally, among them was a criminal department official with an official title. I cried uncontrollably while recounting the entire incident in detail. Gu Huaiqing exclaimed angrily. I was present at the time. Since my elder sister-in-law refuses to acknowledge it, let us hand this matter over to Brother Zizhang for judgment. The criminal department official, whom Gu Huaiqing called Brother Zizhang, immediately responded. This is precisely my area of expertise. I will help Lord Gu settle this case today. I curtsied delicately. My dowry was all made by my maternal grandfather's master craftsman. Each piece of jewelry is inlaid with a tiny character for Song, as my maternal grandfather's family name is Song. Xin Yuan's eyes went dark, and she tugged at the first lady. I'm just a woman. Does the official really intend to search me? As soon as the father-in-law entered, he saw these imperial examination candidates, many of whom were familiar faces from the capital. After the palace examination, they would enter the imperial court to serve as officials. Moreover, the fathers of these candidates were his longtime colleagues. He knew that if this matter was not resolved, it would have a significant impact, especially since Gu Huaiqing had secured the top spot in the first rank. Soon, the Ministry of Rights would be bustling with activity, which was exactly what he wanted. He ordered, "Bring the dowry chests of the eldest young mistress." Soon, the maidservants carried in over a dozen dowry chests. The Deputy Minister of Justice inspected each one, and sure enough, every item contained a character as small as a needle tip. Only under the scorching sun could they be seen clearly. Xin Yuan turned pale with shame and fainted. It wasn't a fake faint, she was genuinely fainted. Her father had repeatedly threatened and bribed those present today not to mention this matter. But there's no such thing as a wall that doesn't let the wind through. Within an hour, the news had spread throughout the capital. The noblewomen who had once been close to Xin Yuan came in groups to mock her. She refused to see any of them, screaming in her room that she wanted to hang herself. It was only when Zhang came that she was finally calmed down. But this was just the beginning. I looked at the wooden box in my hands. 18 years, I had waited 18 years. One day, I would make the contents of this box see the light of day again. I would make sure that the three of them met a terrible end. I don't need them to kneel and beg for forgiveness. A villain's repentance is nothing but a lie to save themselves. Blood debt must be repaid with blood. Xin Yuan's reputation was ruined overnight. No matter how much the Gu family wanted to protect her, they couldn't match my power in the shadows. No matter how much Xin Yuan tried to hide, she would eventually have to face the world. At the banquet, she no longer had the glory of the past. When people saw her, they no longer flattered her but instead laughed behind her back. Her hatred for me deepened. She was certain this was my scheme, that I had deliberately set her up to make her look so disgraceful. She resorted to her old tricks, conspiring with the eldest madam to poison my drink once again. But this time, they would reap what they had sown. She came rushing over with Gu Huaiqing, her father-in-law, and the women from the banquet to catch me in the act. She declared confidently, "I told you she was a shameless slut. She used such methods to steal my fiancé. And now she's using the same tricks to seduce the family servant. Such a slut deserves to be drowned in a pond." She never considered that destroying my reputation would bring her such disdain. This was entirely different from the mockery that comes with theft. In a more severe case, she might even be divorced, and her father would be reprimanded by the emperor and demoted. The door was pushed open, revealing a scene too horrifying to behold. Gu Huaiqing feigned a stern expression as he pulled back the curtain, exposing the eldest lady's flushed face and the servant's sweat-soaked body to everyone present. Her father-in-law was so angry he spat blood. Gu Huaiqing exclaimed in shock, "Mother! How could it be you?" A wave of astonished cries erupted from the crowd. "Oh my God! What's going on? Oh my God! Oh my God!" Xin Yuan murmured, "How could it be you? How could it be you?" She collapsed and rushed in, pulling the first lady aside. "Where's Xin Yu? Where's Xin Yu?" She tore at the first lady's face like a madwoman. "You're not my mother-in-law. You're Xin Yu. You must be wearing a human skin mask." As she scratched the first lady's face until it was covered in blood and disfigured, I stepped out from behind the crowd and exclaimed in shock, "I was just changing clothes. What happened here?" Xin Yuan lost control and shouted at me, "How did you end up here?" I smiled sweetly. "Where else should I be?" I covered my mouth in shock. "Oh my goodness. This is my mother-in-law?" I burst into tears and threw myself into Gu Huqing's arms. "This is so humiliating. I can't live like this anymore. How am I supposed to go on?" The father-in-law fainted from anger. The Shangshu mansion was in chaos. And after sending the guests away, my father-in-law divorced the eldest wife and forced my older brother and Shin Yuan to divorce. They didn't even care about the child. Less than 3 months after the wedding, Shin Yuan was sent back to the Shin family. It was indeed a great disgrace. Her spirit was completely broken, and in just a few days, she had lost so much weight that her eyes bulged out. I burned incense for my mother. Facing the gloom of the ancestral hall, my heart was bright. When the results of Gu Huaiqing's palace examination were announced, the entire capital trembled. The elderly emperor, upon seeing Gu Huaiqing's face in the palace, lost his composure and blurted out a woman's name. Upon recognizing the jade pendant Gu Huaiqing wore, he was overjoyed, performed a blood test to confirm his identity, and confirmed that Gu Huaiqing was indeed the emperor's son. Back then, the imperial relatives held absolute power, and the imperial family was dwindling. Aside from the daughter born to the empress, most of the other concubines who were pregnant met untimely deaths. Gu Huaiqing's mother was a palace maid who served the emperor. After discovering she was pregnant, she feigned death and fled the palace to seek refuge with her twin sister. Her twin sister was none other than Lord Gu's concubine. When her sister left the palace, she was brutally murdered by the empress's men. From then on, Gu Huaiqing's mother took her sister's place and lived in the Gu family, until she encountered bandits while leaving the palace and was cruelly killed by Zhang Shi. 3 months later, the emperor passed away, and Gu Huaiqing ascended the throne, while I was crowned empress. Upon returning to the Shin family, Shin Yuan reluctantly knelt down to congratulate me on my long life. My gaze swept over my father and Zhang Shi, finally resting on Shin Yuan's face. Cherish the time you have left together, for you will soon die. I smiled brightly at my father, who forced himself to remain calm and threatened me. If I die, do you think you can keep your position as empress? Without me, do you think the emperor would have made you empress? He only did so out of respect for the Shin family. I fiddled with the nail polish on my fingers. Father, you don't know, do you? I no longer go by Shin Yu. I have taken my maternal grandfather's and mother's surname. My name is Song Yu, and that is also the name recorded in the imperial genealogy. He could no longer maintain his composure. What did you say? I innocently replied, but you were originally a son-in-law to come over of the Song family. It was my maternal family who raised you and sent you to school. Of course I must take my mother's surname. Otherwise, what would you do? Would you want to die childless? You flew into a rage and tried to hit me, but the guards I brought with me held you back. I smiled sweetly at Shin Yuan. Now you don't have to bother removing my mother's tablet from the Shin family ancestral hall. My mother now has a tombstone erected by me, and she will be honored by the Song family's ancestral line. I tooted and stood up. The Shin family's ancestral line will soon be cut off. On the anniversary of my mother's death this year, I carried the wooden box I had examined into the hall to appeal for justice. Inside the box were the truths about my mother's drowning that my maternal grandfather and I had collected over the past 18 years. My maternal grandfather, with white hair and trembling, was supported by others as he entered the hall. He knelt down with a hunched back and struggling legs, holding a petition in his hands. His eyes were tearful, and his voice was choked with sorrow. We are commoners. We beg the emperor to take pity on us. My maternal grandfather knelt on the ground, his elderly body trembling as he bowed his head forcefully, crying out in grief. Shin Yuqing killed his wife and abandoned his daughter, disregarding human ethics. My poor daughter was not even 20 years old. She was the apple of my eye. My maternal grandfather cried until he fainted and was carried away by the imperial physician for treatment. The emperor ordered the Ministry of Justice and the Supreme Court to jointly investigate the case. Zhang Shi and Shin Yuan were imprisoned, while my father faced other charges awaiting trial. There was no need for me to act. His colleagues who coveted his position and his former friends, who held his secrets, were all waiting to take his place. On the day my father was sentenced to execution, My frail grandfather, disregarding all attempts to stop him, insisted on making 3 prostrations at the temple to fulfill a vow. He lit a lamp for his mother's soul and, with tears in his eyes, said, "My dear daughter, being a girl is too hard. In our next life, let's not be girls. Let's be birds, perched on my shoulder, accompanying me, and I will accompany you. Let's spend our entire lives together, happy and content." After everything had settled, Gu Huaiqing began preparing for the coronation ceremony. "This time, I can finally marry you in style." My maternal grandfather was overjoyed and shed tears, placing the bracelet my mother wore on her wedding day on my wrist. "I couldn't see your mother on her wedding day, but at least I can see you now. Now I can give your mother an account when I go to the afterlife." Gu Huaiqing was drunk. His eyes reddened, and he held my hand tightly, unable to stop the tears from falling. "In this lifetime, I've finally married you again." I patted his back. "We were married in the last lifetime too." He shook his head. "We were married. But you didn't want me in the last lifetime." I embraced him and began to undress him. But he suddenly grabbed me, crying like a child and begging me, "Don't have a child. Please. I want Yun Yang, not a child." He clung tightly to me, burying his face in my neck and sobbing, "Don't have children. Just take Yun Yang." I patted him like a child. "All right. No children." He nodded happily, "Yes. Just take Yun Yang." Story Epilogue. Gu Huaiqing was reborn and returned to the day when he and Xinyu were both drugged by Xinyuan. Seeing the real Xinyu alive in the attic, his heart raced. He had sought immortality for many years and knew that reincarnation might exist in this world. But now that the day had come, he remained calm. He must proceed step by step. He must not alert the enemy. He had not expected Xinyu to propose marriage to him in this life. He regarded this unexpected turn of events as an influence of his rebirth. But for him, it was a good influence. He kept a newly made jade hairpin hidden in his robe. That night, when he sent Xinyu home, he pinned it in her hair with his own hands. She was a bit surprised. "How did you know I like magnolias?" He smiled smugly inside, but kept a composed expression on his face. In his previous life, Xinyu had always loved this reserved side of him. "I guessed," he thought to himself. "I know everything you like." He thought to himself, "But I'm still your favorite." In his previous life, Xinyu had died in childbirth. At the time, he had only locked Xinyuan and Zhangshi away. Who could have imagined that they would manage to poison her in prison? After Xinyu's death, Gu Huaqing woke up every night in terror. Unable to sleep, his body wasted away rapidly. Soon after, a cold illness easily took the young emperor's life. In this life, after Xinyuan and Zhangshi were imprisoned, Gu Huaiqing rushed to poison them both. He did it himself. This time, he would not allow any misfortune to come between him and Xinyu. In his previous life, he and Xinyu were a couple who respected each other deeply. They had never argued in all the years they were together. When they were together, he felt at ease, and did not think much of it. After Xinyu died, he realized how deeply he loved her. In the vast palace, Xinyu's figure was everywhere. When he was awake, her past smiles would always appear before his eyes. In his nightmares, it was the agonizing cries of Xinyu during childbirth that echoed in his ears. There was blood everywhere. Invisible blood, sticky and viscous, like a net enveloping him, suffocating him. He was by Xinyu's side in the delivery room. For the first time in his life, he cried with such heart-wrenching despair. The living, burning Xinyu slowly grew cold in his arms. He begged heaven and earth for mercy. But heaven turned a blind eye, and earth showed no mercy, tearing Xinyu away from his world. This lifetime, he would never let history repeat itself. He would live a long life with Xinyu. He would share the same room in life and the same grave in death with Xinyu. In the 2nd month of his reign, he adopted a prince from the imperial clan as his crown prince. Amidst the chaos of state affairs, it took 3 years for the crown prince to establish himself in the imperial court and finally take charge of state affairs. He took some time off to let the crown prince handle the paperwork at night, while he took Xinyu back to his maternal grandfather's home to explore the mountains and rivers, and plant herbs in the medicinal valley. They encountered a bone-reading master, and Xinyu became interested. But he grew afraid. He wanted to take Xinyu away, but Xinyu had already reached out her hand. After examining her, the fortune teller exclaimed in surprise, "How old are you, young lady?" 23. She replied. The fortune teller pondered for a moment and said, "Last year, you were destined to face a great calamity that would have been difficult to overcome. However, you were protected by a benefactor in your destiny. The hardships are now behind you, and you will enjoy smooth sailing in the future. Live a long and prosperous life, and have a harmonious marriage." After leaving, Xinyu whispered in his ear, "This fortune teller is wrong. I didn't have any misfortune last year. Last year was great. The whole year was wonderful. Nothing bad happened at all. My little niece even gave me a red envelope during the new year." Gu Huaqing chuckled, feeling happy inside, and gently agreed with her. "Yes. He's wrong. I'll give you one today too." Xinyu nodded happily. "That's so nice. I love the new year the most." That night, someone placed a bag of silver coins on the fortune teller's stall. The fortune teller did not speak. "Thank you." The fortune teller smiled. "A generous person has gone to great trouble to arrange this. There's no need to thank others." He chuckled. "You're right." The end.